Oh,
well,
it's not. Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Are we going? Good. All right, folks. Here we are. We're working on a Dietz number 25 side lamp. This is a first generation model. It has the older street lamp style of top with the multi-sections. Also the lever that lifts the retainer that would hold the globe here. This one has a couple problems on it. It's got a bottom that has some rust through, and then it has a broken solder joint here, and it had a solder problem here at the clip where the reflector was. So I'm going to show some basic techniques on how to fix this type of a problem where we have maybe looks like someone tried to fix it at one point, but they did not get a very good purchase on the metal. So the first thing to do is to remove whatever solder is left, either original solder or repair solder like this. Heating it up with a microtorch just in the area where you want to remove the solder will do the trick. This has a fair portion of original finish to it, even though it's kind of grungy. Looks like this was originally a brown Japan finish. I would date this lantern to somewhere between 1895 and I think about 1903, 1905, somewhere in there. Had maybe just shy of about a 10-year production time. They got away from this multi-sectional top, which is all hand soldered together, and went to the modern style top, like on a standard Blizzard or D-Light style lantern. Got just a little bit of solder left right there, getting the last little bit. We're going to take and clean that with a little bit of sandpaper also. I'm going to go ahead and do this one while I've got the torch going. Looks like this fell apart at some time and someone tried to hold it together with perhaps some 50-50 solder. On repairs like this, unless it's a large gap, I usually use 60-40 solder, even though that's not really what it was intended to be used for. It does work out very well. Any type of impurities on the metal will give you a hard time in soldering the repair back. So now I'm going to take a little bit of 220 sandpaper and I just kind of clean this with a little bit of acetone. Get whatever paint I can off. I'm making this repair actually before we put this lantern into the pH down solution, so that the solution will actually kind of homogenize the finish, the look. There's another trick that I'll show you too on how to make the solder look original. This one was definitely a Japan black when it was new. I think I'll try to replicate that look when we get to that stage of the restoration on this. Not a lot of lanterns were done originally in Japan black. The one model that comes to mind that was most commonly done in brown rather was the policeman's lanterns. So this is 220 wet or dry sandpaper. It does a pretty good job of prepping the metal for a solder repair like this. I don't know if you can zoom in on this, but it's almost like new tin underneath this. The finish, even though it's grungy, it's got a lot of original tin plate on the metal here. So we're all completely dried there. Remove that. Now the other thing you've got to make sure of is that on this type of repair, you've got to make sure that the alignment is just the way that it was when it was new. So you want to make sure that this is at 90 degrees This particular model has feet that have been added to it, I think. I don't believe these were original, although just looking at the finish, the bottom was painted black, so I have to look and see if there's other models that have this example. These are typical of the feet that were used on the bottom of the square side lamps. So it's very possible that a first generation lamp would have similar feet. You can see how badly this is rotted through. The tin plate ate through in quite a few areas there. But that repair will be easily fixed with POR 15 gas tank sealer. So going back to this, let's see how close we are. I'm going to use a weight on top, and we've got a 90-degree brace there. Looks like that's about as close as we can get. Well, it's very important to use flux. The best flux that I have found is Harris Stay Clean Flux. That right there. That comes in much smaller bottles also, but I do a lot of soldering, so I buy it by the quart, and usually 6 at a time. It etches the metal. It also will age the solder for you after you do the solder repair. I'm using Johnson 6040 rosin core solder here. This is the smaller 062 diameter solder. Whenever I use 50/50 solder, I use 1/8 inch, 0.125. The idea is to heat just where you want the solder to flow and to draw it across. Now sometimes I'll cheat and I'll use a small screwdriver to give the finish edge, make it look factory. See, that's drawing. I got a little warm there. If you overheat a piece of metal that you're applying solder to, the solder will tend to want to flow everywhere. If it does start flowing everywhere, that means you've got to just stop, wait for it to cool down, and then start over. You can also apply flux to kind of control the temperature of what you're working on. This is giving me a little bit of a hard time right here. But see, if you use a small screwdriver, you can control the flow so that you're drawing it right to a point. If you have to, you can always come back in and take a little bit of sandpaper or a file and file off the edge. I'm going to rotate this around just to get this other side here. Again, I've just very gently put just a little bit of flux. That brush, by the way, is not a standard paint brush. That's a horsehair brush, or even it might even be a swine bristle brush. Okay. There we go. This just needs a little bit of touch up right here. That had some old solder still on the side here. Well, now that we've got that attacked that way, I think what I'll do is take the weight off, take our 90-degree brace, put this on its side, and you notice I'm using a 1-inch thick iron disc, which makes for a pretty good tool on the workbench when you're working with irregular shapes. I have various discs, different sizes in that we use to build up exactly what you need depending on what you're working on. That and magnetic placement tools, welders' magnets work out real well also. Just have to be real patient sometimes with the solder, and again, make sure that you don't apply too much heat. If you're using a plumber's torch that's way too large, these micro torches that run on butane, you can get a better grade version, which really don't do anything extra for you, but you can get a better grade at Lowe's or Home Depot or any of the hardware stores. I get these orange ones at Harbor Freight, and they do the job pretty good. You can pick them up on sale, usually for about $8. This is looking pretty good. I want to kind of clean that one spot up just a little bit more. There is an awful lot of original Japan on this, but I do want to refinish it, so I think we'll give this a bath in the pH down solution, and then do a complete refinish on it. Last week I started working on the Model 25, or the version of the Model 25 that was produced right after this version. And on that one, the bottom was so far gone I did have to remove it and make a whole new replacement bottom, which is kind of a tricky operation because of all these steps on the tank. Sometimes you can cheat a little bit, make a wood form, use flat nose pliers to turn the edge. It's got about an eighth of an inch edge on the bottom there that you have to solder to. Okay. I'm going to just clean a little bit of that Japan finish away on this side, since there's a lot of torque on this particular joint. This what we'd call a knee brace. So that's it. Again, acetone we clean that with. I'm going to apply, you know what, I'm going to wipe that. I'm going to take the sandpaper just to be sure. Right like that. The metal can be just the slightest amount contaminated with something, and the solder will not stick to it. Most people who've never soldered before are very intimidated by the whole process. Really, as long as you remember that you have to have a little bit of flux on there, and that too much heat is bad. As long as you remember that, should be able to come up with a pretty clean solder repair. You notice how I'm positioning this. Again, I've got a 2-inch block here just to position this nicely. When these lamps were originally made in the factory, they had jigs for everything, and so they would have exactly the right angle that was needed for each solder joint, and you know, they could turn them out to several hundred in a day. A typical employee might solder together anywhere from 100 to 200 lanterns when this model was made. And in that time, of course, what they were using was irons instead of a torch. They had a flame burning continuously on the bench in an iron holder. The iron holder would stay in that flame until they needed it, or to warm itself up. And they would draw the iron along the solder joint to heat the metal and then apply it. Of course, you'd have to use sal ammoniac to treat the iron to keep the solder from sticking to the iron. But yeah, it was an entirely different process when this lantern was made originally. You notice I just apply a little bit of heat and pull it off, and a little bit of heat just to make that solder joint look right. Okay, maybe the camera can zoom in on that. about as factory as I can make it look. Actually, if I blend into Japan, this could go sit on the shelf and no one would ever know that it was repaired. Not that I'd want to do that, but we got one more solder repair here. Now this is the clip to hold the mercury reflector. I'm going to just put the flux right along in there. And on this, I'm going to set this flat on the table iron, and this needs a little more weight than what I can apply with this, so I'm going to apply a couple weights. You might want to come around to this side to see this operation. Okay, so I've applied flux. Got the screwdriver handy. Going to apply heat as evenly as I can get it without going too much. And then I'm going to use the screwdriver. This is a Craftsman screwdriver, by the way. I've used a lot of the low-end screwdrivers, and they just don't hold up to the heat the same way that the Craftsman screwdrivers do. So I've kind of given up on the low-end screwdrivers. This particular screwdriver I think I get for $3 at our Sears store across the street here. And hardest thing I have is not burning them out, but everybody wants to grab a hold of it to use for their soldering. So I'm always on the lookout for the small screwdriver. So let's see how that looks. Got a little bit of extra solder there maybe, but I think that looks pretty factory. So we'll put this into the pH down solution. I see another loose solder joint here. I might end up having to just add a little bit right there and right here. But as far as the bottom knee brace is concerned, that's a nice solid joint now. It should last another 100 years, no problem. So we'll sign off for now. This will go in. I'll make another little repair up top here, and this will go in pH down, and we'll start cleaning up in a day or two. Thanks for watching.